I did something horrible that is unacceptable, and I realize that. But I don't deserve to die for the actions of 3 individuals.
It's January 1995, Nashville, Tennessee. The weather that week had been cold, muggy during the days, but the nights almost sharp enough to sting when you draw in a breath. At a place called the Job Corps Centre, a kind of workforce training programme for young people trying to get their lives on track, 4 teenagers were crossing paths. One of them was Colleen Slemmer, blonde, open-faced, 19 years old. She'd grown up in Jacksonville, Florida, but came to Nashville to learn computer skills and eventually go back to college. Her mum said she was friendly, the kind of person who smiled at strangers and tried to see the good in people. But being new meant adjusting. She didn't know most of the students there, and over the weeks, she started to realise she'd caught the attention of another student, not in a good way. That student was Christa Pike. Christa was 18, she'd had a rough childhood, abuse, neglect, trauma. She was quick, she was sharp, and she was unpredictable. She could be funny one moment and frightening the next. Her boyfriend, Tadderall Ship, was 17, quiet, withdrawn, but just as intense as Christa in his own way. The two of them were pretty much inseparable. They talked constantly about dark things, Satanism, rituals, black magic. For most people at Job Corps, it probably looked like teenage rebellion, but for Christa, that imagery, pentagrams, devils, blood, felt real. It gave her a sense of control, of power. And when she started believing that Colleen was flirting with Tadderall, that same obsession with power turned into jealousy, and jealousy turned into hate. People later said Christa couldn't stop talking about Colleen. She complained about her to her friends, she called her names, she made threats. She brushed it off, thought she was venting. Others said they saw something darker in her tone. One girl later told investigators that Christa said she wanted to scare Colleen, that she wanted to make her pay for flirting with Tadderall. No one thought she meant murder. Then, one evening, Christa approached Colleen at the centre and said she wanted to talk things out. Maybe go hang out with her in Tadderall off campus for a while. She made it sound friendly. Colleen, probably tired of all the tension, agreed. She might have thought, finally, we can clear this up. So, that night, the 12th of January, the 4 of them left together. Christa, her boyfriend Tadderall, her roommate Shadola Patterson, and Colleen. Christa said they were going to smoke some illegal substances, hang out, maybe explore an area near the University of Tennessee Agricultural Campus. They never made it to any party. The spot they picked was out past the Job Corps campus, down a barely lit path, near an industrial area that bordered a tangle of woods and tall weeds. There was a steam plant nearby. The area smelled faintly metallic, hot and cold at once, the way air gets near machinery. It was late, the kind of night where the sky looks frozen. According to Shadola, they'd been walking maybe 20 minutes before Christa turned on Colleen. At first, it was just words, Christa mocking her, accusing her of trying to take her man. Colleen tried to stay calm. She said she didn't even like Tadderall, but Christa wasn't hearing it. Her voice rose high, cutting fast, the kind of anger that burns out of nowhere because it's been boiling for weeks. Colleen probably realised too late that this wasn't going to end as a talk. Things escalated fast. Christa shoved her, Colleen pushed back, and then Christa pulled out a box cutter. One moment it was just shouting, the next Colleen saw the reflection of the blade under the streetlight. Shadola would later say that Colleen's voice changed, panic hit immediately. She begged to go back, but Christa pressed in saying, I just want to scare you. What followed from every account was chaos. Christa slashed at her, quick small cuts at first, on the chest, on the arms. Colleen screamed. The sound echoed off the metal siding of the steam plant. She tried to run, but Tadderall grabbed her, held her. Christa taunted her. Colleen was alive for most of what followed. She fought, she pleaded, she told them she hadn't done anything wrong. She asked them to stop. But instead of stopping, Christa told Tadderall to hold her tighter. She cut Colleen again, deeper this time. Blood began to soak through her shirt. The ground, hard-packed dirt, took on dark patches under them. Christa laughed while she stabbed, not constantly, but in little bursts, like she couldn't believe what she was doing. Eventually she picked up something heavier, a piece of concrete about the size of a brick, jagged. She used it to hit Colleen in the head, once, twice, over and over until Colleen collapsed. Even when she was down, Christa wasn't finished. She dragged her by the hair a few feet, taunting her, still convinced she was taking her boyfriend. Then, in what she claimed later was part of a ritual, she carved a pentagram into Colleen's chest. The pattern wasn't neat, it was jagged, uneven, done by a trembling hand. By this point, Colleen wasn't moving. Christa eventually knelt close to her, so close that her face nearly touched Colleen's, and she whispered something. No one knows exactly what. Then she stepped back, picked up that same rock one more time, and swung it down. The silence afterward was overwhelming. Shadola was shaking. She hadn't joined in. She was in shock. She'd seen something she couldn't make sense of. Christa, by contrast, was calm. In the dim light, she leaned over Colleen's body as though inspecting her work. Then, and this part would later horrify investigators, she reached down and picked up a small fragment of bone that she had broken loose during the beating. She pocketed it, a keepsake. Then, still breathing heavily, she turned to the others and said, "Let's go." If you enjoy this video, please subscribe. The videos take a very long time to make and it really does help. They walked back towards campus slowly in silence. Somewhere near halfway, Christa started to giggle. Not hysterical laughter, just short bursts. Nervous, proud, exhilarated. She told Tadgerall he did well. Shadola, terrified, said nothing. When they got back to the job corps grounds, Christa washed the blood off her hands and clothes. Then she began to talk. Not to the police, to other students. She bragged. She told multiple people that she had taken care of Colleen. One girl said Christa even showed her the bone fragment she kept as proof. Another student called her bluff, and Christa told her, "I'm not lying, you'll see." And sure enough, the next morning, the body was found. Maintenance worker was doing rounds near the steam plant when he saw something that shouldn't have been there. A crumpled shape in the dirt, near the edge of the woods. He got closer, realised it was a young woman. Her face was barely recognisable. The front of her skull had been crushed. Her clothes were torn. The word Satanic had started circulating almost immediately because of the markings carved into her skin. Police arrived and began photographing the scene. They noted several things: the head trauma, the defensive wounds, cuts on her arms and hands, and the deep carving on her chest. Whoever had done this had taken their time. Back on campus, word spread that Colleen was missing. Staff started checking dorms, calling names. When investigators come asking questions, it didn't take long before multiple students mentioned one name: Christa Pike. They said she'd been talking, bragging even, and that she and Colleen had been seen walking out of campus together that night before. Within hours, police brought her in for questioning. When Christa talks in her confession tape, she sounds casual. She laughs. She tells the story with little flourishes, like someone gossiping about a funny party incident. She even makes jokes. At one point, she tells investigators that Colleen begged, saying, "I didn't do anything wrong." Christa smirks and says, "That's what they all say."
I don't even think I was just like right there because she made me so mad. And I just couldn't with her. And she was just going, "Please don't, please don't." I said, "Shut up, I don't want to talk to you. I don't want you to talk to me." I said, "I just want to find some way to get out of this." I said, "It's gone too far. I need to do what I've done so far."
There's a moment where the detective asks her why she did it. Christa pauses and then she says, "Because she was trying to take my man. Because I wanted to. Because it was fun." You can hear the detective go quiet for a few seconds after that. She shows no remorse, no hesitation. She even tells them about the trophy, the bone fragment, and they later find it hidden in her belongings. When they arrest Tadgerall, he mostly validates her story. He admits he held Colleen down. He claims Christa was the leader, that she told him what to do. Shadola, who first claimed ignorance, eventually breaks down too. She admits she was there, that she saw everything. That night, Nashville police pieced everything together. They had motive, jealousy. They had witnesses, multiple confessions. They had evidence, the hospitalization photos, the pentagram, the bone. And they had 3 teenagers, 2 killers, 1 bystander, whose lives were about to be permanently changed. Christa's trial moved surprisingly fast. By 1996, she was standing before a jury in Knoxville, facing charges of first-degree murder and conspiracy. The prosecution didn't need to do much heavy lifting. Christa's confession alone painted a horrifying picture. They played tapes of her laughing about it, bragging to friends, and acting proud of the killing. The autopsy photos shown in court made even seasoned reporters turn away. The medical examiner detailed that Colleen had suffered dozens of injuries, slashes, blunt impacts, fractures, but that she was alive for much of the beating. One juror later said it was impossible to unhear the way the coroner described her fighting, trying to crawl away even as she was being struck. The defence leaned heavily on Christa's mental states. They talked about her abusive upbringing, how she'd been assaulted, neglected and kicked out of multiple schools. They said she'd been obsessed with Tadgerall and mentally unwell, suffering from personality disorders. The prosecution didn't dispute any of that, but they argued she still knew right from wrong, that she lured Colleen deliberately, that she bought a blade, that she bragged afterward. The jury deliberated for just a few hours before coming back, guilty on all counts. When the judge asked if she had anything to say, Christa barely looked up. She shrugged. And when the sentence was read, death, she didn't flinch. She smirked. She was 19. Tadgerall, only 17 at the time, couldn't be given the death penalty. He was sentenced to life in prison. Shadola Peterson, who had neither touched the victim nor tried to stop it, pleaded guilty as an accessory. She walked away with probation and time served. 4 teenagers. One is dead, one serving a life sentence, one sitting on death row, and one by sheer chance and cowardice avoided prison altogether. All because of jealousy, because of the fear of losing control over someone else. Reporters outside the courthouse said that people didn't cheer or gasp, they just stared. Because even though justice was being served in the legal sense, nothing about that day felt like victory. A young woman, barely an adult, had been murdered in one of the most cruel personal ways imaginable. And the person who did it was another teenager, someone who laughed about it, someone who looked almost proud. There was no sense of balance to it. It just felt empty and broken. After her conviction, Christa Pike was transferred to Tennessee Prison for Women in Nashville, death row. She was the youngest woman in the entire United States waiting for execution at that time, 19 years old, and she quickly gained a reputation inside those walls. At first, guards said she kept to herself, but that didn't last long. Within a few years, she started getting into fights, verbal at first, then physical. She wrote letters to other inmates, sometimes romantic, sometimes threatening. In 2001, something shocking happened. Christa attempted to kill another inmate, a woman named Patricia Jones, by strangling her with a shoestring. The two had gotten into an argument, supposedly over another prisoner, and instead of walking away, Christa wrapped the lace around Patricia's neck and pulled. Patricia survived, thanks to guards stepping in, but that incident sealed Christa's reputation. Violent, volatile, unpredictable. She was charged again for attempted murder. Doctors evaluated her and described her as having serious mental health issues, a toxic cocktail of trauma, narcissism, and borderline personality disorder. But even they agreed. Christa knew exactly what she was doing when she killed Colleen. Still, there were moments, fleeting ones, when people saw flashes of the scared, damaged teenager underneath. In letters later made public, Christa wrote about feeling lost, about missing her mum, about realising too late how dark she'd gotten. For Colleen Slemmer's mum, May Martinez, the years after the trial were a blur of grief. She said she'd sometimes wake up in the middle of the night and still expect to hear Colleen's voice. Then reality would hit again. She talked about her anger, but also, strangely, about pity. Pity for Christa, because in a way, they were both mothers who lost daughters, one to murder and one to her own violence. May spoke at multiple hearings over the years, pushing to make sure Christa's death sentence stayed intact. And she always said the same thing. This wasn't about revenge, it was about remembering Colleen, what she went through, and how her story shouldn't fade into a statistic. She once said, "People love to talk about Christa Pike. They forget my daughter's name."
There's not a day go by and I don't think about Colleen or how she died and how rough it was. And I just want Christa down so I can end it, relieve my daughter so she finally can be resting. Honestly, my heart breaks every single day because I keep reliving it and reliving it, and I can't no more. And I want this to happen before I die. Otherwise, nobody will see justice.
In the early 2000s, Christa started writing letters to people outside prison. Some were to supporters who viewed her death sentence as too harsh, others were to strangers, usually men, who wrote to her out of curiosity or obsession. Some of the letters were disturbing, flirtatious, manipulative, filled with dark references. But others sounded almost normal. In one, she talked about liking cats. In another, she thanked someone for sending her a crossword book. She swung from one mood to another like a pendulum, from soft, almost sweet, to cold and argumentative. A psychologist who studied her correspondence said Christa Pike never stopped being 18 inside her head. She just aged around it. Over the next decade, Christa's lawyers launched appeal after appeal. They argued that she had suffered from untreated mental illness, that her age should mitigate her sentence, that her first trial didn't give adequate weight to her psychological evaluations. Each time the courts upheld her convictions and death sentence. In 2010, a group of international activists filed a petition with the Inter-American Commissions on Human Rights, claiming that executing someone for a crime committed at 18 violated global human rights principles. Tennessee paused her execution while reviewing arguments, but ultimately, again, the courts maintained a ruling. In another appeal, Christa claimed she had ineffective counsel at trial and that prosecutors had exaggerated the Satanic angle to bias the jury. That petition also failed. All this time she sat on death row, same routine, same cell, same closing walls. She once said in an interview, "It's strange how you stop being afraid of dying over time. You just get used to it." Today, Christa Pike is in her mid-40s. More than half her life has been spent behind bars. She still occasionally writes letters, some remorseful, some defensive. In one from 2021, she talks about hoping to die without fear. Her attorneys continue to file appeals to spare her from execution, mostly on humanitarian groups. There's no set date for execution at the moment. Everything's still in the slow grind of appeals. Colleen Slemmer was 19 years old. Christa Pike was 18. An hour in the dark turned both of their lives and the lives of everyone around them into something unrecognisable. And nearly 30 years later, that night in January is still echoing. Thank you for listening today, and remember, stay behind the yellow tape.